Welcome back to Dungeons & Dragons Homebrew Builds, the series where I'll be constructing classes, weapons, races, and more based on characters and items from your favorite anime, comics, TV shows, and video games. Originally, I planned to do a Baldur's Gate 3 video next. I ran the poll and you guys chose Josuke, but while I was testing, I realized that a mod that had the Way of the Astral Self Monk subclass was likely to come to consoles as soon as next week, and since that subclass would be perfect for what I had in mind, I decided to go ahead and do D&D Homebrew Builds first and then come back to do BG3 next. Hopefully the Monk subclass mod will have made it to consoles by then, but if not, let me know what other suggestions you guys might have for a stand. I was thinking I could always fall back on humanoid summons, but I'd prefer if I could just do Astral Self since it's literally the JoJo subclass. In any case, speaking of you guys picking a D&D thing on a poll, for this video, you guys chose the Grappler Baki Karateka build, so that's what we'll be doing for this video. To start off, let's get into the fundamental precursory information. For your hit die, you're gonna get a D8. It's the die that the monk class uses, and monks are basically D&D official martial artists, so it fits a karateka, which, along with a kung fu practitioner, is probably the mold for the archetypal martial artist. For proficiencies, you'll get no proficiencies in any armor, weapons, or tools. Karate means empty hand, so we're going to be training to fight strictly unarmed. And yes, I'm aware of Kobudo and Kobujutsu, but while it's very often paired with karate, that's not karate, it's got a different name for a reason. For saving throw proficiencies, I went with dexterity and constitution. Karatekas have to have fast reflexes to avoid attacks, but also the fortitude to tank attacks, grit their teeth, and keep chugging. For skills, you get your choice of two of the following. Acrobatics, since karate has a bit of acrobatics and a few kata, and a couple of jumping spinning techniques. Athletics, obviously. Insight, as a high-level martial artist must be able to sense or discern one's intentions through body movements and such. Intimidation, again for obvious reasons. Medicine, as the level of anatomical knowledge required to break a body would also in theory apply to restoring it. Nature, since it's not uncommon for old-school karateka to train off in the wilderness. Perception, also for obvious reasons. Persuasion, because you gotta make your living by convincing people that they need to learn how to defend themselves or learn how to fight by paying you for your classes and memberships. Sleight of hand, just due to the general hand dexterity of karateka. Stealth, specifically since, in Baki, we see a lot of karate fighters' sneaking skills. And finally, survival for the same reasons as the nature skill proficiency. With the fundies covered, let's talk about the class features for the class and the features for the two available subclasses. Well then, what better way to kick off the class features for our karateka class than with the karate class feature? In effect, it's basically the martial arts feature for monks. You can only use it when you're unarmed and aren't wearing armor and wielding a shield. It allows you to use dex instead of strength for your unarmed strike attack and damage rolls. Your unarmed strike damage die starts as a d6, and it grows stronger until it ends up as a d12 at 17th level. And you can use a bonus action to attack with an unarmed strike after attacking with an unarmed strike on your turn as an action. It's all pretty run-of-the-mill, nothing much different from a monk yet. And to complement our version of the martial arts feature, first level karatekas also get their version of unarmored defense, body conditioning. This feature makes your AC equal to 10 plus your dex mod plus your con mod, as long as you aren't using a shield and you're unarmored, since monks use wisdom for their ki, but a karateka's conditioning is more so about their physical and mental strength, which is more like constitution. Our final feature for first level is the signature strike of karate, the seiken. If you use a seiken unarmed strike, your unarmed strike deals an additional d6 of damage to represent it being not just a normal unarmed strike, but a proper punch using biomechanics like rotating your waist into the strike, rotating your punch for extra added force, and striking with the first two knuckles to properly align the radius and ulna bones in your forearm. Any close-fisted hand strike you do can be a seiken strike, so later you'll get a feature called the Bodhisattva fist, which can gain the extra damage from seiken, but non-closed fist hand strikes like the nukite or kicks like the axe kick cannot benefit from this feature. First level gave us our essentials for being a karateka, so now let's move on to second level where we'll get a couple of features to strengthen our unarmed strikes and a new attack action feature called the axe kick. First feature of second level, Kotaitsuki, a feature to represent Doppo's ability to send grown men soaring with his strikes. When you hit a creature with an unarmed strike, you can subject them to a strength saving throw, and if they fail, they're launched backward by 15 feet, which then goes up to 25 feet at third level. Jishinzuki is another feature you get at second level, this one representing Doppo's strength to be able to launch a massive concrete pipe into the air just by striking the ground. With this feature, so long as you have enough movement to jump and you can still make an unarmed strike, you can slam the ground and launch anyone within 5 feet of you into the air. When they land, they have to make a DC 15 acrobatics check or else they fall prone. You'll get a feature later that works in conjunction with this one, but for now, it's just a good way to prone a group of enemies that are all grouped up around you, which they probably will be since this class is a frontline DPS type of class. Finally, you get Axe Kick, which allows you to do, of course, an Axe Kick. Doing an Axe Kick causes the unarmed strike's damage die to increase by a stage, so a d6 becomes a d8, a d8 to a d10, and so on, to replicate kicks being more powerful than punches. It adds an additional damage die to your damage roll due to the Axe Kick getting a bit of a force booster due to it starting high and coming down onto the target while working with gravity, and since kicks have a further range, the Axe Kick unarmed strike has its range extended by 5 feet, but the downside is that this attack receives a -4 attack roll penalty, -2 because it's a kick, and kicks typically tend to take longer to launch than a hand strike since you've got to bring your leg up and chamber the kick, and another -2 because the Axe Kick is a 2-stage kick, bring the leg up then drop it down, so the target is going to have plenty of time to react compared to a typical strike, which makes the Axe Kick more likely to whiff in that regard. Moving on to 3rd level, oh look, it's the feature that works with Jishinzuki. Hayai-Uchi allows you to make an unarmed strike against all the creatures launched by Jishinzuki as a part of the same action. Just like how Doppo launched the pipe and busted it into pieces with a flurry of strikes before it hit the ground. We've gotten quite a few offensive features so far, only having gotten body conditioning for defense at 1st level, so let's talk about Ukewaza, a feature you get at 3rd level that allows you to block an attack targeting you that deals bludgeoning damage to reduce the damage by half. I know it's a little niche since it only works on bludgeoning damage, but don't worry, you'll get features later that either help with other damage types or make it so that you'll be dealing with bludgeoning damage a lot more. Trust me, you'll get it later. Getting back to that good old karate striking destruction, the Shinzotsuki feature makes it so that you can roll your unarmed strike attack roll at disadvantage to specifically target a creature's heart, and if you land the hit, the target has to make a con save. If they save, they just take the unarmed strike damage, but if they fail, their heart is destroyed. 3rd level's pretty early to get an insta-kill feature, but it is locked behind disadvantage and a con save, and it's also conditional. If the target doesn't need a heart to live, this attack really doesn't do anything. Like, sure, a typical humanoid would die instantly, but an undead or an elemental or whatever would be completely fine. Now here's where things get interesting. Subclasses, or styles as they're referred to here. The 2 Grappler Baki subclasses are God of War, based on Doppo Orochi, and Lethal Weapon, based on Katsumi Orochi. For the God of War style, you get the Kotsukake defense feature, the Sukuto attack feature, the Nukite attack feature, and the Maiba stance defense feature. Kotsukake allows you to use your reaction to retract your testicles into your pelvis to negate the damage of and any conditions inflicted by attacks specifically targeting your groin. It's incredibly niche, but that's what Kotsukake is. On the bright side, at 10th level, this stance also allows you to contract your muscles to make your body harder, allowing you to add your con mod and proficiency bonus to your AC, so at least that's generally useful. Sokuto is a lot more straightforward. It's a kicking unarmed strike that deals slashing damage and has a -2 attack roll penalty because it's a kicking unarmed strike. You can try to negate the attack roll reduction by making it a jumping kick, which also makes the attack deal more damage, but you gotta make an acrobatics check or you'll fall on your ass and the kick will be normal. By that same token, the Nukite allows your unarmed strikes to do piercing damage via thrusting with a spear hand, and if you do it with 2 hands, which you certainly can, the attack gains an additional damage die. Better yet, while at 3rd level, you can only use your Nukite if your hands are in the condition to do so, but at 4th level, much like Doppo, you can still use Nukite even if your hand was just a stump. Finally, for God of War Karateka at 3rd level, the Maiba stance. When you use this stance, which you can do as an action, you can't move or use an action, but as a reaction, you can just outright completely negate a melee attack targeting you and even counter the attack with an unarmed strike of your own. You even get a little bit of a stunning strike at 10th level since, at that point, a creature hit by your counter has to pass a con save or be, you guessed it, stunned by the strike. Lethal Weapon Karateka really only get 2 subclass features at 3rd level, Ippon Ken and the Headbutt. Ippon Ken is a bit of a strange feature, I think, but basically, you can use a single knuckle punch to target a specific point on a target's body for a specific effect. Like, you can use the lingering injury chart, or you, the player, can literally be like, I Ippon-ken him in the eyeball to try to blind him, and maybe the DM rules that attacks against him gain a bonus, and he has disadvantage on perception checks, but you'd need to get his other eye to actually blind him. The attack also has a -5 attack roll penalty because of the difficulty of striking a small, specific area, a -5 reduction mechanically being the same thing as disadvantage, but stackable unlike disadvantage. Headbutt, on the other hand, is simple. When someone makes a melee attack against you, as a reaction, you can headbutt them in the face. It does normal unarmed strike damage, but it also interrupts and stops the attack if the target fails a con save, which can be pretty nifty, I imagine. At 5th level, the Karateka class gets extra attack, so you can attack twice on your attack action instead of once, but it also gets the Crushing Defeat feature, the Blinding Speed feature, and the Kaemete feature. Crushing Defeat is pretty simple. You just get the ability to do what Doppo does to Suido and crush an enemy with a bear hug, which in D&D terms is using your bonus action to tightly hug a creature you have grappled, which deals damage to them equal to your athletics modifier, but Blinding Speed is a little more involved. It was that thing Doppo did to Kato when he disappeared for a second during their fight, if you want to call it that, and he Kenshiro'd behind him. You can make an opposed dexterity check against the creature's perception, and if you succeed, you can move up to your movement behind them and remain obscured. Lastly, for 5th level, with Kaemete, you're basically so fast creatures have to pass a dex check to even use a reaction in response to you and your actions. Of course, referencing that training game that Doppo does with Baki and Katsumi. Kicking it on up to 6th level, the God of War and Lethal Weapon subclasses get new features, but the Karateka class on the whole gets some as well. Karateka all get 1/10 of a second, a feature representing how Doppo was only a 1/10 of a second too slow to defend himself against Yujiro while inebriated, wherein the feature allows you to add your proficiency bonus to your dex score and dex saving throws. Then you get Prime Time, which basically makes you immune to the effects of aging, other than aging to death, which represents that up until Doppo was literally killed by Yujiro, he was still considered to be in prime physical condition despite being in his 50s, and most martial artists no longer being considered in their prime condition by their 30s. And finally, there's Sensei, reflecting both Doppo and Katsumi's skills, far exceeding even a typical black belt. With Sensei, you can parry an unarmed strike targeting you as a reaction, which adds +5 to your AC, like Shield. If the attack misses, you can counter with an unarmed strike as a part of the same reaction. In addition to those features, God of War Karateka get Rear Naked Choke, Sengen, Sanshin, and Kokuken. Rear Naked Choke allows you to choke a creature you have grappled and strangle them, causing them to be knocked unconscious, but you have to grapple the creature first, the creature gets a chance to escape, and of course this only works on things that need blood flow to the brain to remain consciousness, so probably not something like, say, a skeleton. Sangan allows you to make every attack rolled against you rolled at disadvantage, and allows you to only take half damage from failed dex saves and none from successful ones because your chameleon eyes help you to see any attack coming, which in turn allows you to defend against them more successfully. For Sanshin, you can take the stance as a reaction, which allows you to reduce any damage received by half, but you're stuck like that until you decide to stop using the stance, which you can do at any time. Last but not least for 6th level God of War features, you get Kokuken, an unarmed strike that blinds and stuns the target on a failed con saving throw. This group of features was definitely the most diverse. You got a choke from a grapple, a defensive option that allows you to evade attacks better, a defensive option that reduces damage taken, and an attack that induces a couple of nasty conditions for a round. Instead of those features, lethal weapons get kick-killing scissors, a blocking technique, the quadruple median line strike, an attack combo feature, and Katsumi's signature Mach Punch. The Scissor Block feature basically lets you add your Athletics mod to your AC as a reaction against a non-weapon using melee attack, and if the attack misses specifically because of the AC bonus, you actually grapple the attacker due to their attacking limb getting caught between your elbow and knee. On the more offensive side is a 4-strike attack, the Quadruple Median Line Strike, where all 4 attacks have a -5 attack roll penalty since it's a jumping combination involving kicks and targeting specific vital points along the median line of a creature's body, but inversely, each strike that lands is treated as a critical hit due to hitting vital points. Mach Punch was a feature I definitely had a hard time doing justice, and fun fact, I've actually had this class built for, say, 2 years? But this feature I actually redid like 2 days ago because I just was not happy with it even after several attempts at redoing it. Regardless, I think I got it right this time. First, this attack takes the place of one of your attacks when you take the attack action, but because of its speed, you can actually perform up to 3 Mach Punches for the price of 1 attack. As for the punch itself, it deals damage equal to 2 times your martial arts die, due to of course being much stronger than a normal punch, but it also requires a creature to pass a pretty high dex check of DC 10 plus your dex mod times 2, and that's your dex mod times 2, not the whole DC, in order to use a reaction against this attack, again due to its speed. Moving on to 7th level, the Kime feature prevents any attack targeting you from being rolled with advantage unless you can't see the attacker or you're straight up unconscious. A feature representative of Doppo's ability to see through Yujiro's Udande technique even though he couldn't stop it. 7th level also gets us Body of Tempered Steel, the other half of our Ukewaza feature. With this feature, we can now reduce slashing damage by half with Ukewaza as well. Lastly, we have 5 Thrusts, a feature that allows you to make up to 5 Seiken unarmed strikes into critical hits once per long rest, representing the 5 Seiken Zuki strikes Doppo used to cave in Yujiro's chest during their fight. At 13th level, those Seiken strikes also break the target's ribs like he did to Dorian, which forces the creature to make a hard con save every time they try to take an action. If they succeed, they're fine, but if they fail, they're basically incapacitated from the pain, and that's the case until the broken ribs are healed. Just like with 4th level, 8th level is just an ASI, so moving on to 9th level, we have a couple more features, including an admittedly niche or not directly combat applicable one, that feature being Reset. When you get a broken bone or some kind of broken bone condition from a lingering injury chart, you can automatically reset the bone as a reaction, allowing you to temporarily heal the injury. At 16th level, the feature gets a little more useful since you become immune to the effects of a broken bone altogether, unless it's the result of something like a bone being completely severed or something, so less niche but still. Another feature at 9th level is Resilience of the Empty Hand, which is basically the Tough Feat as a class feature, and yeah, it does stack with the Tough Feat itself. 9th level closes with Fumiashi, a feature that allows you to track a creature as though you have blind sense for up to 30 feet, like how Doppo somewhat kept track of Yujiro with his hand despite his, predicament at the time with, losing an eyeball and all. Being that we've been covering the showings and feats of the Karateka and Baki chronologically, and we just covered the part of the conclusion of Doppo's showings during his fight with Yujiro, now at 10th level, we finished pre-maximum tournament karate feats, powers, techniques, and abilities, of course save for Katsumi, whose first appearance was in the maximum tournament. First, Mind and Body to represent Doppo's comeback against Yujiro at the end, a feature that grants you immunity to the stunned condition. Pretty simple, but a very nice conditional immunity. Then is Zanshin, a feature based on Doppo's keeping track of all of his own injuries after Yujiro tore him to shreds. It was hard to implement this into D&D, but I basically came up with the idea that, because you're able to keep track of all of your injuries, if someone tries to heal you, you can use the help action to heal more since they can more effectively heal your actual injuries instead of just doing a general blind heal. Finally, for pre-maximum tournament karate feats, inspired by Doppo's being brought back to life after Yujiro killed him, Shinshin Kai Seishin. Basically, with a successful nearly impossible medicine check, if you die and your body remains intact, you can be brought back to life at the cost of losing a level, like how Doppo had to train for a year to get back into fighting shape for the maximum tournament. Moving on to Katsumi and Doppo's feats and abilities during the maximum tournament, we start at 11th level with Tamashiwari. Tamashiwari in real life is when Karateka break bricks and boards to test their techniques, and Doppo and Katsumi practice very much the same way, so I replicated that by having this feature grant the users unarmed strikes the siege property. Another iconic thing in karate is the karate chop, or as it's known in karate, the shuto uchi. For this feature, you can now deal slashing damage with a hand strike instead of having to kick, but like how Katsumi's chops surpass Doppo's, in the very next level, your Shuto Uchi gains an additional damage die. Another classic from karate is the low kick, particularly a signature of Kyokushin karate, but while Doppo is based on Kyokushin founder Maso Yama, his and Katsumi's style is a little different, so instead we have Gedan Sakuto. While it's a kick, it's a low kick, so it doesn't have an attack roll reduction. For this attack, if it hits, the target has to succeed on a con save or else they can't disengage or dash, their movement is halved, and they can't jump until they finish some kind of rest. For our subclasses, everyone's moved on to their next major arc. God of War gets techniques Doppo used during the maximum tournament, and Lethal Weapons get techniques Katsumi used in the pickle fight. First for God of War is Toe Kick. It's a fast waist-level front kick, so no reduction to the attack roll, and if it hits, the target has to con save against it. If they fail, they take piercing damage and the attack is treated as a critical hit, since Doppo's Toe Kick is like getting stabbed by a knife. For Fumasatsu, your unarmed strike is treated as a critical hit, and if they fail a con save, you dislocate their jaw and they can't talk or eat solid foods until their jaw heals. You're gonna notice a trend at this point of Doppo targeting a lot of vital points, which I'll represent with attacks becoming critical hits, and our attack features applying some horrible effect, which will most likely invoke a con save from the target. To prove my point, the final technique Doppo used to take out Yu Amanai is the next one we get, Roppongeshi. This attack is an unarmed strike that's treated like a critical hit, check, and the target must make a con save if it hits, double check. If they fail, their skull is undone and they're knocked unconscious. If they succeed, like Amanai did, they're instead incapacitated until the start of your next turn. That's not all though, since Kokuken was part of the Orochi Ryu barrage that Doppo unleashed on Amanai, but we covered that technique earlier. Instead, God of Wars will also be receiving the Bodhisattva Fist technique that Doppo used to nearly defeat Shibukawa, his ultimate punching technique. In short, once per long rest, you can use the Bodhisattva Fist, which is treated as a critical hit, but not for targeting vitals, but because it's the perfect strike. And this strike cannot be rolled at disadvantage or be reacted to due to it being completely untelegraphed. Even Shibukawa, who can predict dozens of moves ahead and could read an opponent's intentions, couldn't counter the Bodhisattva Fist, so that's where that comes from. Lethal weapons get crotch kick from when he opened the pickle fight by kicking him in the balls. The 5 vital points consecutive attacks that he belted off right after, get ready for a lot of treated as a critical hit. And the hitless blow, Katsumi's ultimate attack and the highest evolution of his signature technique. For crotch kick, this one is at least a little different with the whole hitting a vital point angle. This unarmed strike forces a con save, but in this case, if the creature fails, the pain of the strike knocks them unconscious. If they succeed, that's when the strike is treated as a critical hit, and they're just incapacitated until the start of your next turn instead of outright KO'd. 5 vital points is a 5-in-1 attack, so that already starts off great, and in addition, all attacks are treated as critical hits, inflict a condition, or do both. The first strike, Upper Goose, is an uppercut that has a chance to knock the creature unconscious due to rattling and concussing the brain. The Tongue Root strike next, a Hammer Fist strike to the heart, has the creature make a con save, and on a fail, this Hammer Fist to the heart is treated as a critical hit. The third strike, Lightning, is a wrist strike to the floating ribs that busts said ribs and makes the next strike after the 5 vital points strike a critical hit if the target fails the save. The fourth hit is Night Glow, an elbow to the area above the kneecap that gives the target disadvantage on dex saves if they fail the con save. And finally, there's the Hiding Rabbit strike to the leg that halves the target's movement speed if they fail the save. As to be expected, being that all 5 strikes were to vital points, all 5 strikes are treated as critical hits if they land. Finally, for the long list of features gained at 11th level, the Hitless Blow. This unarmed strike deals damage equal to 4 times your unarmed strike die, so twice as strong as your normal Mach Punch. It also deals an additional 2d6 thunder damage due to breaking the sound barrier hard enough to cause a stadium-sized shockwave. And this attack can't be reacted to by conventional means, meaning maybe a spell like Wish or Foresight could let you react, but barring some special ability or spell, this technique is too fast to use a reaction in response to. Now, that all sounds great, but just like in Grappler Baki, this technique comes with its downsides. When you use this technique, you take damage equal to 2d6 plus your martial arts die, damage that cannot be negated by any means, and the arm used to make the strike is destroyed beyond non-magical repair. So you take a decent chunk of damage, and your arm is destroyed to the point that only magic can restore it, so you get some pretty solid damage, but definitely at a cost. I originally planned for this to do the same damage as Lightning Bolt, but I wasn't particularly fond of the damage being a static amount with no relation to your actual martial arts die, or I guess specifically in this instance, your karate die, but let me know what you guys think of that in the comments down below. Now, we've basically covered all of the Grappler Baki's Karateka's powers and abilities from Grappler Baki, so we move on to what the Karateka of Grappler Baki show us in New Grappler Baki. 12th level is another ASI, so starting proper at 13th level, we do technically have one last Grappler Baki era feature before we really get into the new Grappler Baki stuff. The last Grappler Baki feature being Giri Uke, inspired by Doppo's blocking Uamanai's low kick with his foot. We already have immunity to the stunned condition, but now, with this feature, any attack that has a chance of inflicting you with the prone condition is treated as a critical miss, effectively giving you immunity to the prone condition as well, unless the condition is being applied by an attack that requires a saving throw instead of a hit. So, remember how I said earlier that you'd eventually get a feature that helped you to deal with bludgeoning damage more? Like, we have a lot of features that deal specifically with bludgeoning damage, but what if you're fighting somebody with a sword or an axe or whatever? You're definitely more likely to come across an enemy with a weapon than an unarmed fighter, but thankfully, this feature is gonna help with that. Introducing Wire Cutter, a feature based on Doppo severing Dorian's steel wire with a Shuto Uchi. With this feature, you can attack and destroy any non-magical item you hit. Now, maybe at face value this doesn't offer much, but you have to use it like how Doppo did. If an enemy you're fighting has a sword, you can just break it. Chop his sword in half horizontally, and now he's got no choice but to engage in a fist fight or run away. Sure, it doesn't help with magic or ranged attacks or piercing damage, but you're not going to have an answer for everything. That said, you'll definitely get something for ranged attacks soon. For now, we get Pressure, a bit of a niche feature to deal with potential bleeding if that's a condition or affliction you have to deal with in your games. Basically, the feature allows you to stop bleeding by applying pressure to the wound with a free hand like Doppo did when Dorian severed his hand. Side note, but to be able to do that, apply enough pressure to close a wound off from blood loss, that's pretty damn impressive. Anyway, 14th level gets us another 3 class features. First, Preserved, a feature that comes from, of course, following the feature where Doppo's hand gets cut off and he stops the bleeding, Doppo preserving his hand after Dorian cuts it off. With this, similarly to the feature where Kureha brings Doppo back to life, this is a non-magical way to have a limb reattached. If you take measures to preserve a lost limb, like say putting it in an ice bucket, you can get it reattached if the person attempting the procedure passes a DC 30 medicine check, with the check being nearly impossible because the doctor responsible for this in Baki had to stitch every single nerve back together, an incredible feat in its own right. So long as the limb was preserved and the check is passed, you regain perfect control of the limb after 3 days, just like Doppo did. For No Mercy, which I think is based on Katsumi caving Doyle's skull in, if I remember correctly, it's been a while since I built this homebrew, the damage of your unarmed strikes is doubled if you have advantage on the attack, just like how Katsumi seemed to do a significant amount more damage with his Seikensuki when he struck Doyle while Doyle was prone. For the last new feature at 14th level, Blinded, a feature that makes it so that being blinded now no longer causes you to have to roll your attacks at disadvantage. 15th level gets us the Counter feature, which not only allows us to block an attack with Ukewaza, but you can then also knock the opponent prone, which lets you make use of No Mercy a lot more frequently and a lot easier. It's like a block into a sweep and then a finisher. Moving right along to an interesting feature along the same vein as Wire Cutter, we have Ken no Hakai, a feature based on Doppo's fight with Ollie Jr., where he struck AJ's fist and damaged the already broken hand. At 15th level when you first get this feature, it allows you to make an unarmed strike as a reaction against a melee attack targeting you, and said unarmed strike breaks the creature's limb, like their hand or whatever they attacked with. At first I thought there'd be a cool synergy if it was just against unarmed strikes, because you could break their weapon with Wire Cutter on your turn, and then break their hand with this feature when they attacked with their fist on their turn, but then I realized that there's really nothing stopping you from doing something like that against an armed opponent either. Like, if he's got a guardless sword, you can just punch his hand and break his fingers, in turn making it impossible for him to grip the hilt. If his weapon does have a guard, you could just strike the forearm for a similar effect. Also, just like how Doppo did when fighting Junior, you can strike the same limb a second time and cause the break to compound out of the skin, making it harder to heal. Now the break is more severe, so maybe if the person could push past the pain and use the broken hand on a constitution check of DC 20 or something, now it would take more like a DC 30 to use a hand that badly broken. In terms of healing it, now it'd be a lot easier to heal it with magic. It's not an immediately treatable injury through normal means like just completing a long rest or using a healer's kit or whatever. It'll take a couple of weeks of no use to naturally heal or straight up magic. Now for the strike that punched straight through Dorian's muscles and right into his bones, Seiken Chudan Tsuki. With this, Your unarmed strikes can bypass armor class bonuses granted by armor, like how Doppo's Seiken strikes punched right through Dorian's natural armor, his thick muscles, and busted up his ribcage. At this point, 3/4 of the way through, we've gotten everything. Stronger attacks, better AC, reactions, defensive options, plenty of offensive options, attacks that apply conditions, conditional immunities, temporary damage resistances, several different damage boosters and damage type changers. But in these last couple of levels, the subclasses and really the class as a whole comes into its own. At 16th level, we start with one of the most impressive feats from any karateka in this series. When Doppo's mastery of karate was so high, he was able to predict all of Dorian's attacks despite being under a complete hypnosis. With mastery of martial arts, you gain immunity to illusory effects, the charmed condition, and really any spell or effect that would alter your perception of reality. Another conditional immunity under the belt, and arguably one of the best ones a DPS can get. Getting to the portion of the battle where Doppo began to piece Dorian up, we get the Hizagiri feature, where you can kick a creature's knees. They've got to do a con save, and if they fail, their knees are destroyed and they're knocked prone. Sure, prone is good and all, but the knees being destroyed here is vital. Assuming you're fighting a humanoid with only one set of knees, yeah, they're prone now, but they also can't move, they can't get up, they can't make any dex saves, they're effectively completely crippled, which is a little more than just useful. For our last overall class feature at 17th level, representing the Seikenzuki that showed Dorian true fear, we have, well, Seikenzuki. With this, when you use a Seiken and you successfully hit the creature, you can pull your punch and just scare the target with the threat of that killer punch instead. They're forced to make an insight check opposed by your intimidation, and if they fail, they're frightened of you. I was honestly pretty shocked by how many conditions this class can inflict and resist, kinda surprising in hindsight. In any event, for the subclasses, God of Wars will get all the techniques Doppo used in the Ollie Jr. arc, and Lethal Weapons will get all the techniques Katsumi used in the Sumo arc, when last he was prominently featured. For God of Wars, we can finally get an answer to ranged attacks other than Sangan, which works on all kinds of attacks, that answer being Mawashi Uke. Basically, you can use this round block to reduce the damage you take from an attack by a d10 plus your dex mod and karateka level. That can be a melee attack, a ranged attack like bullets or arrows, or even a targeted or AoE spell like how Doppo used it to block fire. Another block Doppo used against Dorian was the Shinken Shira Hadori, a technique that allows the user to catch a sword strike and allowed Doppo to catch the blade in Dorian's foot as he attempted an axe kick on Doppo. This feature basically just lets you parry a weapon attack like how you can already parry an unarmed strike and then counter as well. For the last technique we see Doppo use in new Grappler Baki, God of Wars get the hand pocket technique. You can take the hand pocket stance as a bonus action, and no, you don't really need pockets to do this. While in the stance, you can make an unarmed strike as a reaction. If the creature is hit, it must succeed on a con save or else its attack is interrupted and you can put your hands back in your pockets or you can take the stance again. Best part about this feature? You can take this reaction as many times as you want in a round as long as you're in the stance. So the creature takes damage and, as long as the creature fails the save, they can't attack you and you can do it again. The last feature for God of Wars at 17th level isn't a new Grappler Baki technique, but it is, in fact, the sole new technique we see used in the Doppo Gaiden, the Myoko Pressure Point Strike. This technique is actually another utility technique where you can use an unarmed strike to cure the blinded condition like how Doppo cured Kuragami's blindness when they fought. Lethal Weapons, on the other hand, get the three techniques that Katsumi used in his fight against Shishimaru: the mock kick, the drop kick, and the soccer ball kick. A lot of kicks. For the mock kick, a kick variation of Katsumi's mock punch, Lethal Weapons gain an unarmed strike they can use as a bonus action to represent the speed. It does 3 times your karate die, more than the mock punch since it's a kick, but less than the hitless blow since that's the strongest version of the technique, and the mock kick is just as difficult to react to as the mock punch. The drop kick was actually pretty cool. I think I had a good idea. See, because a drop kick is a kick that puts the user's entire body weight into the attack, I decided to use fall damage mechanics. This is an unarmed strike that does an additional d6 of damage for every 100 pounds the user weighs, up to a maximum of 20 d6. Also, it goes without saying, but that d6 goes up with your martial arts die. For the soccer ball kick, the kick Katsumi used to basically defeat Shishimaru, I made it so that it can only be used on a prone creature, but it both gains an additional damage die compared to your normal unarmed strike, and its damage die is increased by a stage. To represent its lethality, if the creature you're attacking has 15 or fewer hit points, they die outright. Alright folks, moving on to the penultimate group of class features, we got 18th level. To start, Fumetsu no Ken. So I believe this was to represent Doppo's tanking the bomb blast to his face from Dorian, if I remember correctly. A little bit of new Grappler Baki cutting in towards the end. Because for this feature, once per long rest, when your hit points drop to 0, they drop to 1 instead. Kinda like how he barely survived the aforementioned explosion. Jumping back to new Grappler Baki to the Ollie Jr. fight, God of War gets bare-knuckle boxing, specifically the trick Doppo used to break Ollie Jr.'s hand with his forehead. Basically, this feature fuses a couple of prior features into one, allowing you to half the damage of an attack while also breaking the creature's attacking limb, though it only works for unarmed strikes, unlike some of the prior features. That pretty much brings new Grappler Baki stuff to bed, but we can't forget the horrifying display Doppo put on against that knife attacker when he used his dark karate. First we have Aura Analysis, when Doppo detected the murderous intent of the killer. Simply put, this feature gives you proficiency or expertise in insight checks since you can literally detect bloodlust and fighting spirit. Then we have the actual attacks where Doppo ripped the guy's throat out, crushed his pubic area, and ripped out some of his ribs, killing him. The feature, Yamiwaza, allows you to perform the throat rip by grappling a creature, which then does damage equal to a critical hit, and prevents the creature from being able to breathe. Then there's the pubic strike, which is also a critical hit of course, but it also knocks the creature out on a failed con save. Then finally there's the Nukite that Doppo used to rip out the ribs. That's a grapple that, if successful, does piercing damage equal to a critical hit of your martial arts die, and puts them in a vulnerable state that causes all subsequent attacks on the creature to be treated as a critical hit due to the failing structural integrity of his ribcage. Just like what happens when you use any other feature to damage or destroy the ribcage. 19th level is an ASI, so that brings us to 20th level, our capstone. Now, this will be a little unorthodox, but this level will feature both class features for the class as well as subclass features, but only for the God of War subclass. I think this is fine since Lethal Weapon has a lot of really powerful attacks and techniques, but it still feels like wrong and weird to only do subclass features for one subclass here. Whatever, let's knock out the class features first. First is Stealth Master. Karateka aren't specifically known for stealth techniques, but like I mentioned for the stealth proficiency, both Doppo and Katsumi were able to sneak onto a military base to see Pickle, so this feature gives you proficiency in the stealth skill. The Takigyo feature is representative of the practice of, well, Takigyo, a training method used in karate where the practitioner meditates under a waterfall. The idea is to steel your body against the temperature and the force of the water, so the feature allows you to reduce the cold and bludgeoning damage you take by an amount equal to your con mod, though only once per long rest. Finally, for the class features, we've moved into the Grappler Baki Karateka features based on what we saw in Bakido and the Doppo Gaiden. First, subdued 3 times, modeled after Musashi intending to attack Doppo 3 times, but also noticing that Doppo sensed Musashi's intentions, which then caused Musashi to predict that Doppo would have defended all 3 of his attacks. For the strongest defensive feature of the class, for 3 times per long rest, you're able to just completely negate a melee attack targeting you outright. That's probably the highlight of the class, but led by the nose, a feature based on Doppo's fight against Sabu Kyoichiro in the Gaiden, ain't nothing to sneeze at either. In the same vein that Doppo is able to focus for the whole fight on not getting hit, always seizing the initiative, and using the tatami mat to prevent a fatal blow, when facing an armed creature, you gain a +5 bonus to your AC and initiative, and you can use your reaction to use something in your environment to block an attack. For our final class feature before the last of the subclass features, Prime Speed, representing Doppo's blitzing the tiger and hitting it a bajillion times. It basically gives you an extra attack on top of your extra attack. Initially, this was going to be the only extra attack style feature, but 20th level is hella late for 2 attacks, so I made it 4. Lastly, ladies and gentlemen, we have the final 3 God of War features: Two-Handed Thrust, Kanuki, and Tsukidashi. For Two-Handed Thrust, it's pretty simple. It's an unarmed strike using 2 hands that deals double the damage of your normal karate die and pushes the target 10 feet away if they fail a strength save. That stacks with any other feature that pushes a creature as well, so you'll be launching them with this buddy. Kanuki is another simple one, just a grapple that restrains yourself and also the target. And finally, the Tsukidashi, the only open hand strike that can benefit from the Seiken feature. This strike does normal damage, but pushes a creature back 20 feet, and yeah, that stacks with pushing features too. Alright folks, I think that about does it for this Dungeons & Dragons homebrew build. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I always enjoy when my main autistic obsession crosses over with my secondary one, but I also get the gratifying feeling of knowing that I gave you guys what you wanted since you guys requested this class and you voted for it. Not sure if I'll be doing a PDF of this class since I spent a lot of time figuring out how to make a PDF for the last build, the prayer build, but it didn't really end up being worth all the trouble, but I guess we'll see how I feel. You'll get the XML file in the Google Drive regardless. Okay, remember to like the video to show me that you enjoyed the video and want more, subscribe to keep up with releases of new homebrew builds, and remember to vote for the next homebrew build. The poll will probably be out after my next KOTOR video, or roughly around that time, think maybe like 3 to 5 months. Alright, I've been Red Fox, the crying YouTuber, and this has been Dungeons & Dragons Homebrew Builds. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.